All right, guys, let's get this thing started, shall we? Hey there. Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm glad to see you all. Folks are going to be joining, so I'll let you in as they pop in. But wanted to let you know I'm thrilled to dive into this topic with you. It's a fun one. It does not have to make you sad. And in fact, I think we can make this really kind of an exciting conversation today because you're going to find it's a heck of a lot simpler than you've been taught, and we can really do some great stuff together with it. Once the process gets mapped, it just sort of opens up a whole litany of things. So, all right, gang. So I see folks are joining, so I'm letting people in as we go here, but I'm going to go ahead and get it started, and never want to punish those who show up early or on time. So we're talking about process today, and we're going to be mapping process. I'm going to talk about a basic metric for doing this, a basic theory or thesis, and a methodology for doing it. I did spend a bunch of time in my career, about 23 years doing this. Of course, there's lots to learn, and it's a vast area with lots of complexity, but actually my bias is to keep it simple. You can go very deep if you can keep it simple, and it gets complicated if you get into jargon. We're going to talk about why to do it. Why map process? Why is this so important? We're not going to spend an inordinate amount of time on that, but we are going to address it. We're going to talk about what process is, because sometimes that gets lost in the mumbo jumbo of jargon, and it can be super annoying. Like, what does a process exactly mean? If you knew how many times I get asked that, you guys would laugh. And then finally, yes, how to do it. We'll dive in together, and I'll do some examples. We'll walk through exactly how to do it. So most common obstacles I hear when I talk to folks on this topic: we don't know how to do process. We don't have time to do process. We don't have somebody who can tackle this. And so, I want you to know I'm not talking over your head. I'm not speaking to you in the absence of awareness. I get your world. I know very few of you have the bandwidth to do this 8 hours a day, or at the, as a focus for your entire role. It's probably, for the most of you, the majority, this is squeezed into a million other things that you have. When it comes to your team and getting everybody on board with this, it doesn't have to be a negative. It actually is a positive. Clarity creates confidence. And when process is documented and when folks are clear about expectations, they do soar. And with Playbook Builder, what we like is you can also showcase your best people teaching what they do, but your team are freaking out and you're already like thinking, how am I going to get this done? I'll show you a methodology today that you can apply to about 90% of the stuff you're going to be tackling. So just to frame it though, why do process? Why do it? There are three reasons we traditionally see that process plays an incredible role. Number one is you decide something's new or something's broken pretty much all the time, and you're doing some form of process all the time. And as you're sitting around in a leadership meeting or just working with a staff person, like, why is this broken? Why is this falling apart? You're really doing process, even if you don't know to call it that. But if you've seen people at a whiteboard and a stock photo going like this and pointing or putting stick-up notes, that's process work, but it's to decide largely. When it comes to training, it's an application of process, but we'll use it as a chassis to get into a deeper layer of information called procedures. But we use the chassis of the process to visualize it, to clarify it, and then as like the cracker that we would put the hors d'oeuvre on top of. That's the structure, is the process itself. The training is going to include other assets and other ideas. We'll talk a little bit about that together today. The last one is to innovate. We're constantly innovating. We just have to. It's the demands of the 21st century. New softwares are coming our way. You're saying yes to new ideas. You, if you're the crazy visionary, God bless you. I know what we are like, and we do chase opportunities, and it's our responsibility to say yes, to stay fleet-footed, and to see around corners and take opportunities when we can get them. But it also can make it crazy. And so to innovate also means to understand second and third order consequences when you say yes to a new product, service, opportunity, acquisition, new hire, new anything. And absent process, you cannot imagine or visualize where the implications are of those changes. So process is crucial. no matter what phase of business you're in. If you're in like, hey, we're figuring stuff out around here, process is for you. If you're like, we've got this licked, now we want to 10x this joint, process is for you. And if you're at the end of the rainbow and it's time to put a bow on the business and have an exit, process is for you. For most of the clients I talk with in this forum, you're somewhere like here, where you are standardizing and then you go, let's go, and then you start to scale. And then what happens is you say, oops, we broke something, and you go back to standardizing. Don't be put off by the dynamism of that. It's totally normal. It's what you should expect. But process is valuable at every level of maturity in the business, and it spells real economic benefits, which you probably have heard me talk about. The biggest thing that conspires against tackling process is just where in the hierarchy of your business do you place it, and as far as a priority. I'm not going to make you raise your hands, but just show of hands, if you guys want to raise your hand with me, how many of you agree that process is important? Well, you're on this Zoom in the middle of the afternoon, so my guess is you all agree process is important. This is a little smart aleck of me, but I can be a bit of a smart aleck. That's one of the reasons it's hard to get it done. If process is viewed as being urgent, boy, does it get the resources and the time it needs. But when it gets shuttled over to the category of importance, sometimes it doesn't get the focus or the energy or the time it really demands. Like it's important to vacuum under your refrigerator, but it doesn't mean you get it done. And in a small business, urgent always takes precedence. And so trying to get process in your mind into the areas where it's urgent is a trick of thinking, but it is a huge jump. Here's a way you can do it. Look at the red in your scorecard and start there. Now, I'm going to always touch on this for every webinar, but if you want to know how to tackle process, the most important thing that we can do together as a team is so to get process into the category of being important, yeah, I'd say go find the red in your scorecard and go start there. There's two schools of thought. There's sort of air quotes doing process in the conventional sense and go grab a textbook and learn how to do this. Or there's this very practical sense, which is crap is broken. Let's go fix it forever. Let's go at the things that drive us nuts 2 and 3 weeks in the red. What is going on in there? Go figure it out as a process and know that you can eradicate variability and a lack of communication in that arena forever. That is practical. That's common sense. All of us are good at that. When we get into the theoretical and the jargon, and am I doing process correctly, you start to lose your confidence around your own instincts. Go to your instincts. You're running a business, you're involved in one, go fix things that are broken. Process will be the way that you solve it, but instead of training a person, you'll train a system. Then you own the system and you can train everyone consistently and scalably. Now, last thing I'll say about that, process is important. It probably won't get done. Just hang on to that one as like a, bumper sticker for the rest of our conversation today. You want process to stay in the urgent category. Attach it to stuff that's broken and go fix things. And you'll do just great with this stuff. Now, I'm going to get into a little bit of jargon, a little bit of the vocabulary, because my gosh, my folks I talk to have been just turned around by people using the language interchangeably, using the word for a million different purposes. And we just want to get some clarity around that. It'd be helpful, right? I talk to really smart people who ask me stuff like this. What is a process? And they mean it. They're not like, being sarcastic. I'll come off stage and like, okay, I was told this. What does this mean? What does a process mean? Should I delegate the creation of process? Should I just hand it off to members of the team and let them do their own thing? How often should we update these things? Weekly, hourly, monthly, quarterly? Like, what's the deal? How much detail is enough? Is it too much? If I teach them how to do this, I said, not enough. Where do I draw the line? Where should I even start? And things like, how much time is it going to take? Because I'm all full up at the end this quarter. And finally, the jargon. What's a procedure? Is that the same thing as an SOP? How does it differ from a process? And what's a swim lane? And on and on. And all this stuff just becomes like a mountain of silly jargon and language. Like, let's just talk like humans together today. I may not be the smartest person in the room, but I've been doing this for a very long time. And simplicity allowed it to be accessible to everyone. And so we'll name process, we'll define it, we'll get into it, and we won't use the silly language like A business process is a series of steps performed by a group of stakeholders to achieve a concrete goal. What the hell are you going to do with something like that, right? Like, that doesn't help much. That doesn't address the kinds of questions that you have. Don't we want to talk like humans? Let's talk like humans. This is what a process is. It's a flow of work. It's moving through time and space, okay? Literally, clock starts and something is moving. That's a flow. That is a process, okay? The procedure is how to do it. That's you get to that next level of specificity where you get down into how it gets done. And a policy is a rule or a standard. It's either it gets completed at this standard of quality or at this deadline. This is the control around the work product. Those three words are simple. Now we introduced a new one called playbooks. What is a playbook? Well, a playbook is a collection of processes. So you can see the taxonomy here. Here's a sales process, and it's comprised of these. This is a sales playbook. It's comprised of these processes. These all reside inside of a playbook. So as you all are using our software, you can think of it like that. It's still a collection of processes around a fixed target. It's a sales process, but those things are dense. The discovery process probably has several steps inside of it, and it has to be handled with care. So to give you the elbow room to really unpack that, we structure playbook a certain way. So another way to look at this, just for definitional sake, to decide and structure how you want something done, that's process. Okay. To train people, you need procedures. To ensure they do it right, you need policies, and to put it all in one place and drive FBA, you need a playbook. You need a place to house it, like a center, one source of truth for your company. Okay. So once more from the top, this is a sales playbook. That's what you would call it. Okay. These are processes that live inside of it. These are the procedures and the policies that provide the standard and legitimate directions on how to deliver that. Now, there will be time for some Q&A at the end, but I wanted to frame this for you as just a landscape because we talk about process, people see stuff like this, and like, what do you do with this? How do you translate this nonsense on a whiteboard you concocted into something usable for your team? We're not going to go that route. We're going to talk about how to do process from a standpoint that's very, very simple. There are three parts of a process, okay? The correct elevation, that's an important conversation we're going to have. Is this, what level are we at? And that's where oftentimes when folks get stuck and they're asking what's a process, they really mean, what's the elevation? Is how to tie my shoes a playbook or a process or a step? Where does it live in the entire anatomy of a playbook? Number two is start and stop points. Defining those is crucial because so much of what process can help with are the handoffs. Either you're collecting information upstream to be able to do a portion of work, or you're handing it off to the next in that chain of value, and being able to define, well, this process starts here and ends here is crucial. And then finally, the correct order, which seems idiotic until you actually have conversations and you get into the mix and you realize there are sometimes huge problems with process simply because they've transfixed or transposed the order of operations and things just don't get done, or there are workarounds or whirlywigs, or someone's walking over to someone's desk simply because the bottlenecks weren't pushed to the front of the line, the clarity around communication wasn't there. So when we talk about a structure for writing up a process on a whiteboard, a sheet of paper, or what have you, it's nice to define these portions first, the start point and the end. And then really quite simply, I look at these like chapters in a book. When I interview a subject matter expert, I literally tell them, listen, you've probably never read a business book with 600 chapters in it. Have you? Probably not. They probably have 10 to 12 main topics inside of it. That is how we would start together. We would say, let's lay out the milestones, the chapters, you call them whatever you want. These boxes, there's only 5 here, but they might represent upwards of 12 of these main topics. And what's interesting about this simple graphic is that it houses a lot of information. It's a very elegant way to showcase actually a fair amount of heavy lifting when it comes to critical thinking. What elevation am I at? Do I know my start and stop points? And what's the correct order? This can take some time to define. The first question is, what's the elevation? If I find myself talking about content inside of a playbook and I realize that the density of the information is enormous, it may have to move up a level from a step inside of a process up to its own process, up to an entire playbook. So information density is where your critical thinking comes in to decide on elevation. So let's do a use case because it's hard to talk about that in the theoretical. You're building out a playbook and you are thinking about the content that goes into it. You're going to do a playbook for making a grilled cheese sandwich. And you start mapping the process, step one, which is sourcing your ingredients. And as you start to go down rabbit hole on the ingredients for your grilled cheese sandwich, and you're interviewing your subject matter expert or you're emptying your own brain on paper, you realize that you have an awful lot to say about the ingredients. In fact, it's so much information, you realize it's not going to live so elegantly inside of phase one of this step. It's an entire diatribe about sourcing farm to table stuff and which things are GMO or whatever your deal is, and you realize I'm gonna have to bump this up a level. That kind of critical thinking is why it's nice to start playing in the software or using the AI for your templates, because it'll structure that for you and you can see, well, I've got more in there than I'm going to need. And then you can elevate it. You can make a separate module in the software, or you could say, nope, ingredients is such an important piece. It's such a massive part of the conversation. It needs to jump up another level of specificity. I'm going to make it its own playbook. I've also seen playbooks where someone went in and they made a whole video for an entire module of learning. It'd be like opening up the chapter of a book and it said, he enters the room, chapter 2. Wait, time out. Why is that one whole chapter? If you are not providing enough meat, there's not enough information, it's a possibility you should cluster those two together. So it's a back and a forth. What makes people crazy about process is just there isn't a single simple way to do it for every situation. You have to be a little bit fluid. You have to deal with the content you're given, and you have to think about it from the context of the consumers of that content. So what I mean by that specifically is some things like brain surgery, you need to go into the details. Other things your team are going to know how to do, and you may not have to go in that deep. It's just the nature of the beast. Sometimes, certain circumstances, certain teams, engineering, they're going to need a lot of detail and a lot of specificity, or everything you're doing is enormously complicated. And so your elevation will be dictated by that. So you have to keep it a little bit loose. I was doing a call today. I'm working with a team that's just helping them out, and they do property management. And as we started to go into a single stage or like a step of their process, we realized it was vast. It had so many moving parts and they were complicated and each one had multiple moving parts. We decided to squeeze in an extra module so that we could go deep in there and not feel like we were collapsing too many ideas together. How did we make that decision? Simply by how much it weighed. It was like, wow, this is so much, it should be 2 chapters of this book. I know that seems intuitive to some of you. What sometimes when you're too close to your own stuff, it's actually challenging. But just keeping the loose aspect of back and forth while you're working through the volume of information you're unpacking, that's the best way to navigate this because, of course, you've got 2 brains when you're making a process. There's the engineer part of your brain that's weighing, is this complete? Is this accurate? But you're also weighing, is this going to be consumable by my learner? Is it going to be just a wall of information, or should I break this down into smaller bits? Is this one of those situations where it's going to be consumed by two parties. They have very different needs. Let's make that into two playbooks. So balancing from a structural standpoint, it gets a little weird, but that's why we keep the structure simple. So I say to my subject when I'm interviewing, just like chapters in a book or writing a kid's English paper, let's just figure out how we're going to start it. Where does it begin? Where does it end? Now tell me the anatomy like it was chapters of a book. Let's do 8 to 12 main topics, but not more than that. That keeps their brain in that space of clustering and clumping things around traditionally what I call, major milestones of a process. Then we get into the next layer of specificity. We're going to get down into the procedures now. This is that back and forth. You're going to get down into the steps of that. You're going to get down into the assets. What are we unpacking? And you're going to be talking about some of the techniques that reframe it. So here are the details. You go through the structure, high level like this, and then take it down to that next level of detail. What lives in here? Well, I can tell you, this is where you will be seeing and feeling the volume of information will dictate a change of structure. So as you go, hey, I think these are the major chapters, and you start to tease out that next level of information, you realize, oh, wow, this is dense. I'm going to need to structure this one a little differently. Sometimes we'll talk to a subject matter expert who says, yeah, and then half the time we go the other direction. Is it half the time or is it once every 10 times? It's more like once every 10 times. Let's keep it intact as a single process. However, let's make sure that we put a separate piece in there for those anomaly situations. If they say it's actually 50% of the time, sometimes it goes left, sometimes it goes right, sometimes we get the big client, sometimes we get the small one, pull the card over, that's two playbooks because the arc of those is so different and the anatomy of steps might differ grossly. I would say now we're making a decision to make it into two. Start with this really simple graphic, right? It's just really simplistic, just chapters in a book. But then all the stuff that pours out is where your creativity about problem solving, structural design comes in. And it's intuitive as I'm explaining it to you. Trying to unpack it and tell you the thinking seems awkward, but actually it's pretty intuitive. We're basically making recipes. And what we want to be able to get into is, from mom's apple pie recipe, how much of this information needs to be written down? How much of it needs to be video? If we want to capture grandma in the kitchen explaining it, does she need to start at where she was born? Or can we pick it up at gathering the ingredients to make the pie crust? If it's, hey, this is a pie, it has a fixed number of steps, we can make this pretty simplistically and then provide some depth. You have leverage with things like video to provide that depth without monkeying around with the structure. So it really can go back to a very simplistic architecture. I bring it back to you again, just at the very, the beginning of this conversation. You're going to figure out elevation. What are we talking about here? Is this a discrete activity inside of a larger process? Is this the whole thing itself? Where do we decide, is it a playbook, a process, or a step inside of a process? Making a first draft will sometimes reveal that to you in 2 seconds. So I'll draw them on a whiteboard, sketch it out on a piece of paper, start interviewing my subject matter expert or have a chat and realize, holy smokes, there's 80 things for step one. Time, this is different. We're looking at it wrong, and re-architect it. Knowing your start and stop points sometimes requires conversations with other parties, subject matter expert out of the field, and they work on a discrete portion of the process occasionally. But I'll also review the work with the person upstream. Do you approve? Does this make sense? Is this what you're indeed handing off? And on the other side of the process, downstream, hey, if we package this up and ship it to you, is that what you need? Because we need to make sure our process works. The inclusion of software has a lot to do with this stuff. And so oftentimes you'll see a layer of work and then underneath it is a layer of the softwares that underpin it. And that's not unusual. It'll inform how these go down. So getting that correct order and getting those start and stop points can sometimes have a lot to do with what other platforms are involved in the equation. Okay, so simple structure, like chapters in a book. Go down to that next level of specificity. That's your procedure layer, where you're going to go from just the architecture of the process itself down into the nitty gritty, step by step of the procedure. And that can be what you'd use in a three-step process documenter if you're running on EOS. You've been exposed to that. Those are bullet points, but we expand them into broader conversation. We can add videos, we can add quizzes and links and QR codes and attachments. So those bullet points can expand and they can include more information. But architecturally, this is how I would still do it. In fact, what we recommend that you do is once you're done architecting it like this becomes the shot list to then interview the subject matter expert to get the full story out of them on video, especially if what they need to do is demonstrate. But just to map it like this, you can see quite simplistic. It creates those talking points, the bullet points end up becoming conversations, and now you're getting the procedures out of them. Now they're sharing with you. Now they're teaching you the step-by-step and demonstrating it for you. So now you've got this whole packet. You've got a playbook you can just now drop right into the software. You've got your architecture, you've got your assets, and you can build. When I show this, I really am talking about the magic of interviewing grandma in the kitchen. So it's nice to get an SOP. It's helpful to get the ingredients and the directions, but it's not like being in the kitchen with Nona, because she's going to explain things with nuance and color, with emotion. She's going to story tell. She's going to walk through it. So you get this richness on video. You have to start with the structure first. So mapping the process is crucial. Start simplistically, layer it in, look for ways it could break. Oh, shoot. I didn't realize the crust was 80 steps. Time, crust part 1, crust part 2, or whatever. But that's an example of how that kind of thing breaks down and where you can be flexible. So what did we talk about? Why do process? That's the first level of this conversation. What is it? How to map simplistically. Now I'm going to open it up for some questions because I knew if I ate up the clock walking through the details, I'd miss so much of what you want to know about this. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys to hit me up with your questions, and I would love to hear what you're thinking. There's a handful of you on here. Where have you gotten stuck? Where can I answer some questions for this group? So I'm not going to force you. I like keeping these short. So what should you do now? Oh, wait. Yes, resources. Yeah, I've got you covered. Okay, so I've got a handful of things for you. So what should you do now? I recommend this, and it's not a standing rule. Some of you have different bandwidth than others. Some of you, this is what you're doing 100% of the time. For some of you, it's just one of 1,000 hats you wear, and you're squeezing in time. My personal standing opinion about how to tackle this stuff is block the time in the calendar every week, a couple of hours, make it sacred, hold it safe, 2 hours, get your yogurt, your coffee, and know you're going to tackle process in that fixed window. You can sprint on these things and you can gobble up more time, but that's enough. And I'm going to answer Jay-Z's question because I just saw it. Jay-Z, thanks. Number 2 is pick your subject matter expert and pick them wisely. This is really hard. If you have someone that doesn't know what they're doing, it's okay that they discover what they're doing while you're interviewing them, but they should be an expert. So you want to make sure the person you're asking has figured out how to do it. And honestly, most of the time I find they're not only good at it because they are just sort of magically quality, they're thinking about their thinking. They've perfected it by detailing it. And then, yes, I'm listening to Megan's question. I see that one too. And Kelly, I've got yours. So pick a subject matter expert that really knows what they're talking about. And then when you're interviewing them, they may discover, oh, I do have a habit or a technique or something. That's not unusual. But if you pick them wisely, you'll be able to mine for their wisdom. Map it as we've discussed, and then you're going to film. And so the trick that we exploit with PlaybookBuilder and even the AI and the software now is that you can map simplistically, don't write the SOPs, convert that into a shot list, interview them again on camera to get the procedure layer, load it into the software, and exploit the AI to get that detail, that procedure layer out of the video. The software will do it for you. Now I've got a whole bunch of good questions in here. So I've got some resources for you. I've got a whole page of resources I'm going to introduce to you. So Kelly, I'm going to give you a link, or everybody in this one. How much detail is too much detail for policies and procedures? It's a fantastic question. And like I said, we get it all the time. So here's the deal. The situation dictates. If we go at this like we're going to do process in air quotes, hell, they all have to be standard. And there's probably a rule somewhere in some arcane book written 50 years ago. But the truth is, I'm a pragmatist about this. I would say it's kind of like putting salt in the soup, you guys. You might know this much about it, but how much, if this was salt, would you add to the soup? Everything you know, all of the salt you have in the cupboard? You wouldn't. You'd add just enough salt until you get the desired outcome. So when you get pragmatic about this, you go, I don't give a crap how much is in Playbook Builder. It doesn't matter to me. Do I move the scorecard number? How little can I put in before I get the desired result is actually the way to look at it. Do the least amount you can until you get the soup right. So as you layer stuff in, be pragmatic about it. This is technical and detailed, and people get it wrong. I'll put the detail in. Everyone knows how to turn on email. I'm not going to spend 6 hours writing a engineer's version of approach the computer, turn on email. Like, why would I do that? So be discriminating. And I'm going to say something else that's probably, heretical. Be inconsistent. They don't all need the same kind of treatment. Some things require detail and merit it, and others don't. So use your common sense around the need. And Jay-Z, I hope that answered some of your question there. I think what's a tendency is I have a box of stuff, I have to fit it all in. No, you don't. Does policy live inside of procedures or somewhere else? It often shows up with comments that subject matter experts make. So it's a good question, Megan. Oftentimes, companies have standards that have gotten lost in the mumbo jumbo, or we have subject matter experts who embody them but haven't externalized them and turned them into rules. So we sometimes have to dig those out, or they come from management. Someone down here might sometimes stay within the bounds of the policy and sometimes they don't. But where they should live is right directly in the procedure. In fact, they slide right into the how-to manual. This needs to be done this way, and here's why, and it needs to be done with this standard. Those go be elegantly together while you're training. I have seen it where folks have taken playbooks and provided an example of what done right looks like and explicit outline of the policy as a separate step in a procedure. So they'll go step 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they stop numbering and they go standard and they show it so that you not only see how the pie is made, but just like a normal recipe, here's a baked pie looking gorgeous. It should look like that, and it should taste like this, and this is what the experience should be like. So you know what winning looks like. That's a great way to do it. Michael Gerber, E-Myth guy, he also talked about what's it look like if you got it wrong, which I think is an interesting idea. It can show like where does the friction show up if you miss this one. But anecdotally, it often comes out in the narratives when we interview. Any ideas on how to encourage updating or information as processes change? Janie, we look at it as a necessity for a business. There's content that's possibly evergreen, but one of the reasons that Playbook Builder has communications features in it to text everyone, to notify the team, is the dynamism of businesses in the 21st century. The paradigm of LMS was sort of out of academics, right? Like you're gonna learn this, know how to do it for the rest of your life. And it's like, that doesn't work anymore. Now the dynamism of the day-to-day means you're probably going to be updating policies and procedures when you see issues arising in scorecards. However, what I typically recommend is that you audit these things on a quarterly basis. If it's an emergency, you're going to get right in there and fix it, right? And then train everyone on the new policy. But if you're just kind of like wondering, has it been looked at in a while, put them on a schedule. There's actually a feature in the software. It's when you edit the entire playbook, you can give yourself a reminder. Like it's been 90 days, hop back in and check this one out. And I recommend 90 days merely as a protocol, but let the situation dictate. I'm a chef by training, so that salt reference is a pretty good example. Right on. Okay, cool. Yeah, my take on it is one of the things that the rules people with process have kind of done is corrupted the pragmatism, the practicality of how to do this stuff. It's the sort of thing you would do with managing people. You'd see someone making a mistake and you know they're mostly competent. They're getting 80% of it right, but they're missing this little bit. Go and focus on that, right? You wouldn't start them at the beginning of the chain. Somehow when we're documenting process, we forget all of that. We go, well, I'm going to teach them everything. And so these playbooks folks procrastinate. They start at absolutely zero. They forget that 80% of their team know 80% of the work. So I would say do a rough outline of the whole workflow, but emphasize the areas where you have real problems or technical need. Let's see. Any other questions in here? It's fun when we get to do questions. I prefer it, and I appreciate you guys throwing them at me. What's funny about this is I keep this conversation very simplistic, and I map it very simplistically because it gets funky as you get into it. Embrace that. The creative aspect of this has twofold benefits. One is you make a process that's really smart. Process improvement professionals make a lot of money doing what is really common sense. Not to malign these folks, but the truth is you'll stand there at a process and go, why in the hell do we do that? I don't know. Why do we do? Well, why don't we do this instead? And it will really confront you. When you map them out and make them graphical, and you can see the boxes moving through time, you sometimes go, I don't understand. We always have a problem here. Why don't we just do that here? You as a team will be the smartest people in the room instead of some outside consultant. You'll be confronted by the truth. So embrace that. That's a ton of fun. And then in addition to it, when you are interviewing and going back and forth with folks, one of the things that's really neat is you get a feel for the subject matter expert. They also get a feel for what they know. So they become sort of what you'd call epistemological in their thinking. They realize there's a why that's informing their how, a worldview, a value, something that is driving a choice that they make. And what is the most potent thing we see when we interview subject matter experts is when they make those connections. My dad always taught me this, and I've been doing it for 30 years that way because of him. That's a value in our 5 values, core values that drive this business. And I never realized it's how I answer the phone. It's how I actually write an email. It is like so ingrained in me. It's showing up in the work I do. It's expressing itself in choice making, in those policies and standards. And so unearthing that can be revelatory. You can actually back into core values looking at the standard work of your best people. They simply adhere to your core values accidentally. They're aligned with them. That's typically why they've been successful in your organization. They're living them out every day. They live them out. How many rings does it take to answer the phone? Well, around here, half a ring. We let people know immediately they're a priority. Really? Yep, that's just how I do it. Why do you do it that way? I don't know. It's just how I'm wired. And you start to see if you listen and watch them exchange ideas with you about how they do things, they're exemplifying those. It's beautiful. And when you show those people to the rest of your company, boy, it's a thing to behold. It's like just lifting them up and showing them to the rest of the team and saying, this is how this person does this. And it's really awesome. It can really be neat from a cultural standpoint. All right, so I don't see any more questions. I do have more resources for you, but one of them is this, and this is a very simple, but it was hard earned. This took several years to just gather up all this wisdom, but it is a very simple little tool. And also, I'm going to give you a page hanging off of our website that has tools. And so there's things in here for mapping process, for troubleshooting, if you are looking to do that kind of thing. And I'm going to show it to you as well. So let me put this into chat for everyone. Looks like I'm sending this to all of you, but I'm going to share my screen here. So this is a page hanging off the back end of the site. It's PlaybookBuilder tools. I'm going to try to get this thing into the chat. For all of you. There we go. So this page has the process roadmap ebook I just mentioned to you. It has what I call the game plan builder, which is a great strategic planning tool for you. You can set your name in here and the date. And if you're trying to tackle process, what would be true if you did? This will galvanize your resolve. This will codify the importance of this for you. List the 5 big outcomes if you accomplished it. Because I'll tell you, not worth doing if you don't have a good reason. So if you don't have a good reason, maybe you should stop. But most of the time, folks are like, man, it would save us a bunch of time. We can onboard faster. It would really organize, structure the teams, and we would be more successful. And then go ahead and outline all your obstacles, everything that's standing in your way that's frustrating, and just let her rip. And if you feel like Debbie Downer, don't. Obstacles drive strategies, and the more we confront them with our eyes wide open, the better. So dump all of the obstacles down and then start assigning strategies. If you can't think of a way to overcome it, because if you get really honest, sometimes you're like, shoot, I don't even know what to do here. Bring in a colleague, bring in a friend. This is a great opportunity to collaborate. How do I overcome this? I don't have the hours in the calendar. How do I tackle this? I can't get this person to meet with me. And use your colleagues to help you overcome these obstacles. There's the Playbook Priority Planner. And this tool is fantastic. I love this tool. Get your LT to list 12 core processes and start scoring them. You'll be able to validate like which ones should go first, second, and third. That's a great tool. Subject matter expert scripting tool. In case they're nervous, you can help them with that. There's tons of stuff in here. There's critical path, priority planning. There's everything you need to really dive into process and do it easily. And then, of course, we help with the tutorials and the software. If you're not taking advantage of our team, Amber and the success directing team, please do, because we love to support you guys. I'll let you guys go. I love giving your time back. If you're out of questions and you got your needs met, go. If you didn't, we're still accountable to you. So please let us know and we will help. We'll dive into a call with you. We'll do what it takes to make sure you're successful. It's what we're in business for. It's not just doing process. It's not selling software. Your businesses count. They matter to us. So please let us know. You guys take good care, Megan. Good to see you. Thanks for the thank you. And the rest of you all, thank you so much. My pleasure. I hope to see you next week. Join these Thursdays. They're always here for you, and I'll fire off this one via email. I did a great one last week on how to film an interview, and that one I think will be also quite helpful for you all. You guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you all.